Hi, and welcome to the latest in the series of video web briefings. We are recording this just at the beginning of December, the day after we have completed a very interesting foreign ministers meeting, the regular annual December meeting of foreign ministers. But we had a rather unusual agenda for this year's December foreign ministers meeting. That was to discuss, in essence, in terms of decisions, two things. One was how to take forward NATO's relations with Georgia and Ukraine, taking into account the Bucharest decisions, but of course a very, let's be frank, very open, very public political discussion surrounding the Membership Action Plan, which has become a rather politicized term, even though it is simply a process for helping countries come closer to NATO. The M in MAP, the membership word in Membership Action Plan, had of course raised some quite significant alarm bells in different European capitals, including first and foremost in Moscow. So that was one topic. The other topic was related, if not the same, and that was what to do about NATO's relations with Russia, which were put into the no business as usual category after the August conflict, where allies felt and still feel that the disproportionate use of force by the Russian Federation was of concern. Subsequent to that, they were even more concerned by the recognition in Moscow, or by Moscow, of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. These are two Georgian republics that Russia recognized as independent. It was followed in that recognition only by Nicaragua and Hamas. This is obviously not something that is meeting with any kind of success politically, and for very good reason. It is of great concern to many, many countries if we start down the road of changing borders by force, unilateral recognitions of the territories of neighboring states, and of course it raises significant alarm bells in countries neighboring Russia that have movements similar to what we have seen in the past in Georgia, that have Russian minorities, sometimes because passports have been handed out relatively freely by Moscow in these areas. All this to say, there has been concern, and we have been in the no business as usual category. But we also recognize that no business as usual cannot mean no business at all. The Allies want to see a more trusting relationship between NATO and Russia. We have some good cooperation that has been preserved through these few months, including most importantly, I think, on Afghanistan, but also in the seas off the Gulf of Aden. There's been good cooperation between Russian and NATO ships. The Allies decided that the time had come to take a step forward with regard to Russia. They did two things. They asked the Secretary General to establish political contacts with Russia again, and also to have an informal meeting, maybe more, of the NATO-Russia Council in a measured, phased way, so to take it step by step forward and see how it goes, and then before engaging on a formal level, to have the Secretary General report back to them, and then they could decide. Now, you may ask what the difference is between informal and formal. Some have said that it's just a matter of who serves tea. Do you do it yourself, or does somebody else get it for you? It's not quite that simplistic. In the NATO context, for example, at an informal meeting, you don't meet in the formal meeting room, you don't have a formal agenda, and you can't take decisions. So it is much more simply an exchange of views. And in the case of NATO and Russia, I think we both parties want to see a more trusting relationship. But that will have to be built on concrete facts. Concrete facts meaning addressing the issues on which we agree and on which we disagree, but with the kind of rhetoric that allows for trust to be built, which means, for example, that talking in Moscow very publicly about deploying missiles to Kaliningrad, neighboring Poland and the Baltic states, and pointing it at NATO, pointing those missiles at NATO states, is something that is certainly not very welcome. That being said, the decision has been taken to take it a step forward. That's something all the Allies agree with, and the Russian Federation has welcomed this as well. So we had a good result out of this meeting. It's interesting to see, of course, that journalists, I think like everybody else, like to ascribe winners and losers. So you have some who say Russia won. You have some that say NATO certainly won by, in a careful way, reestablishing discussions on our terms. Some say the United States won with regard to keeping things at a measured pace. Some say Europe won by allowing, by encouraging or getting agreement within the alliance for discussions, these measured, phased, informal discussions to begin at all. I think it's fair to say in international relations and foreign policy that if everybody finds something they can crow about, then it's probably a good decision. So we're pretty happy about that. With regard to Georgia and Ukraine, both countries, again, were put up against a media scorecard. I think in general, the media has been quite balanced on this, not necessarily the Russian media, which has been spinning this pretty much as a success for Russia. But if you look outside of Russia, the press has been pretty balanced, to my view, saying, in essence, they didn't get everything they wanted, but they got something of substance, which was a much more enhanced practical relationship between NATO and each of the two countries, which offers a program of support to help them meet the NATO standards they will have to meet to become NATO members. And it is true that the word membership had become, to my personal assessment, almost overly politicized. Neither country was going to join tomorrow. Neither country is yet at NATO standard. And they have some time before them of reforms to make. That is the practical thing that needs to be done. I can tell you that even in the private meeting, all of the 26 governments reiterated to both the Georgian and the Ukrainian foreign ministers, respectively, in the two separate meetings, that they stand fully by the Bucharest decisions. And the Bucharest decisions are very clear, including that these two countries can and will, when they meet NATO standards, and if they so still desire, of course, become members of NATO. So that has been reaffirmed and reaffirmed quite strongly, but it was once again an interesting meeting here at NATO.